Bine ați venit la a treia ediție a podcastului nostru, la Ceas de seară de data asta. Alături de mine astăzi Cosmin și Marius, într-o ediție specială a podcastului nostru. Să începem cu o scurtă întrebare către Marius, că tot povesteați voi înainte să intru eu și eu în emisie. Povesteai un pic de incursiunile tale în lumea discurilor și în lumea magazinelor de discuri. Cum îți imaginezi, care îți imaginezi că va fi următoarea vizită la un magazin de specialitate? Sau cum ți-o imaginezi?
Din fericire pentru mine există platforme gen Discogs, site-uri dedicate progului și așa mai departe. Așa că nu sufăr extrem pentru lipsa unui magazin fizic. Dacă atunci când asculți e mult mai funny să ai un disc în mână și să vezi artwork-ul așa cum a fost el gândit, să simți discul, să ai senzația aia mișto când îl pui pe platan sau când îl pui pe setarul de la CD player, aia e o chestie care nu ți-o poate da niciun format electronic, nici o platformă de streaming, nici nimic. Însă, pentru mine personal, nu e la fel cu partea de magazine. Pentru că acolo, de regulă, mă duc țintit. Am foarte bine în cap lista cu care vreau să plec acasă, de preferat. Și cred că mi-e mult mai simplu să gestionez situația online decât într-un magazin, pentru că de regulă, dacă pun întrebări, mi-e frică să nu pun pe cineva în încurcătură, ca să zic așa.
Deci, Cosmine, tu când o să cumperi următorul disc într-un magazin? Ce zici?
Într-un magazin, să știi că nu am mai cumpărat de foarte mult timp muzică. Deși am fost reticent inițial, am îmbrățișat soluția streamingului de câțiva ani buni, iar în format fizic îmi iau în mod excepțional lucrurile care îmi plac în mod deosebit. Sunt câteva chestii în pre-order, ca să zic, pe care mi le-am luat. Mai am niște preferințe în altă zonă a muzicii, dar care mai pot aștepta și rezist bine tentației de a încerca vinilul, care pentru moment mi se pare că e doar marketing gimmick. Sigur, sunt întotdeauna disponibil pentru a fi contrazis și convins că e altfel, dar în momentul de față streaming-ul e pentru mine soluția cea mai convenabilă.
Păi, într-un anume fel este așa un fruct otrăvit partea cu vinilul. Asta și legat de faptul că acum 2 ani sau mai știu, la MCM a fost incendiul ăla care a pârjolit o treime din tot ce înseamnă arhivă de benzi pe care au fost stocate înregistrările de studio la artiști, începând cu B.B. King și terminând cu Nirvana, ca să acoperim așa un spectru larg. Așa că marea majoritate a înregistrărilor care se fac pe vinil, cu excepția celor noi, evident, se fac de pe variante digitale imprimate pe suport analogic. Deci nu prea mai este lanțul ăla AAA. Înregistrat analogic, presat după înregistrarea analogică și redat în final un suport analogic fully. Și streaming-ul e o unealtă bună, pentru că poți să testezi repede niște nume noi, niște chiar și nume vechi, că sunt o grămadă de vechituri puse pe Tidal și așa mai departe. Încă nu. Pe mine, eu sunt probabil în aceeași situație ca și Cosmin cu streaming-ul. Încă nu am tras spre streaming, deși mai frunzăresc așa pe aici pe acolo câte un YouTube așa pentru elucidare, dar nu mă atrage încă ideea.
Okay, guys, it seems that we have a special guest once more.
Welcome.
Hello, John. Welcome.
Oh, thank you very much.
Awesome. We hear you and we see you clearly.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you for taking the time to join us as a special guest of our podcast. We are Prognotes. Actually, you are seeing half of the team, let's say. I am joined today with I'm joined today by Răzvan with glasses.
Hi.
Hello, Răzvan.
Hi.
Hello.
And we've been looking forward to talk to you today because yes, it was quite surprising to learn that fast about a second release, and it is of course exciting to discover this new one.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, after the first album, I would talk in interviews and I would say, oh yeah, we're going to come out with a new album in a year. And then the reality hit me and I thought, we have to really do this now. So it was, I started, for a while we were thinking, oh geez, what have we got ourselves into this time? But luckily we managed to, we didn't hit any roadblocks, no scheduling conflicts, and everything came across pretty smoothly. So yeah, we actually were able to do it. So yeah, I know a lot of people are surprised, believe me. And I'm kind of surprised myself, to be honest with you.
So
It's a very pleasant surprise, actually.
Oh, thanks. Thanks.
So right now, after releasing the second album, will you tell us again that in 1 year we'll have a third album?
I would say that's a qualified yes, because I've already started writing
for
the third album. Oh yeah. The only difference is now a couple things. We lost some time after I started writing right after we turned in Prehensile Tales, but then we had to start getting ready for the live gigs we were going to be doing at Rozfest and ever. So that was taking time away from that, and then that was canceled. So I got back to doing it again. And now the only qualification is we'll just see, how this whole pandemic thing pans out and if there's going to be any halts in it. But if everything goes to plan and no additional roadblocks, yeah, hopefully another year we'll shoot for it.
That's a great news.
Yeah.
So maybe we can start at the beginning. You have been fairly known in Prague circles, but for our viewers and our readers, tell us a little bit about what got you started into Prague. So how did you?
Well,
how did you get here?
Starting in Prague when I was a kid. I think I'm much, much, much older than you guys, but I grew up in the 70s. I was in high school in the 70s, and I became just completely obsessed with groups like Yes and Genesis, ELP, Gentle Giant, all that stuff when I was in high school. I mean, I love a lot of other types of music and always have, but Prague has always been, music I've loved. And there have been periods over the years where I wasn't that much into it because I think for a while, especially going into the 80s and into the 90s, Prague obviously wasn't as popular. And I think a lot of it was kind of stale, to be honest with you. But I've just always been interested. I keep up, on current stuff. And that's the one thing when I started working with Spock, I was just friends with those guys. And then when Neil came up with that first Spock's Beard album, I thought, wow, that's something I hadn't heard in so long, that kind of prog music. But yeah, I've just been doing it one way or the other with other people, by myself, music, whatever I'm doing, just forever.
That's kind of great because we were thinking about it that beside your stealth career with Spock's Beard,
yeah,
a few people know that you started with the bass guitar, then you moved to guitar, and you ended up with keyboards. So how did this trip evolve over the time?
I started, the first instrument I learned was bass. when I was a kid. I grew up in Detroit. I moved to California when I was about my early 20s and started trying to put bands together. And I got a band together, and we kept having problems keeping guitar players. We went through a bunch of them for various reasons, who knows why. And it got frustrating. And I played a little guitar, and I thought, maybe it'd be easier. Why don't I just move to guitar? I can play rhythm guitar, and we can find a bass player and maybe another guitar player or something. And that's when I met Dave Maros. He was the bass player we got to replace me playing bass, back in the early 80s. And keyboard, guitar and keyboards, I'm not that great of a player on either. I've always been more of a writer who happens to play those instruments. Eventually, I got into keyboards primarily because, just from the writing standpoint, I like to write on guitar, I like to write on keyboards, and I can play enough to get by on keyboards. I'm just definitely not a keyboard whiz or anything like that, but I can get along on them. And yeah, it's just whatever instruments around I want to write with, that's what I go for.
So Dave has been a constant, I think, in your musical life for a number of years now. How did you get to meet the rest of the guys, or how did you end up just collaborating with Ted and the whole gang?
Well, the Spock's connection came actually before I met Dave, because the drummer, when we were going through guitar players, the drummer that was in my band was also in a band with Neil and Al Morse called Casanova. It was kind of like a Styx. They were really good band. And when we needed to go into the studio, my drummer said, "Hey, this guitar player I'm working with, Al. He's great. He'll come in and do the studio thing." Great. So that's when I met Al. I actually met him before Dave. And then I knew those guys. And then when Spock's got together, I was just into the music. I said, "I'll do whatever I can to help you." I wasn't involved musically at first, but I would just do things like I do some artwork for them or some photography or whatever they wanted. And I had a studio in my apartment, so they'd come over and do some overdubs there, and we'd record. And then obviously when Neil left, I started writing with the other guys, and from there I met Jimmy obviously right away, because he was the live drummer when Nick went out front to sing. And then Ted, I met him somewhere before he was in Spock's. I don't remember when, but yeah, I've just known him for a long time.
So what are some of your favorite Spock's moments? What's your favorite song that you did with them?
Boy, that's a tough one. It's funny because when I was doing them, it's one thing, and you get really excited about a certain song, but over time you look back and you think, "Oh yeah, I'm more into this one." There's a lot of them. I think the first one I was really proud of was the one I wrote with Dave, "Ghosts of Autumn," on the first album. I think "She Is Everything" was a good song. In that pair, I'm trying to think what else. I think my favorite from the Nick era, when Nick was singing, was probably "Jaws of Heaven." I wrote with Dave off of the 10th album. Mm-hmm. The last one Nick was on. For the when Ted was with him, boy, that's tough. On Brief Nocturnes, I really like "Something Very Strange." I like the way that turned out. Oblivion Particle, I think "Disappear" is my favorite one. And Bennett Built a Time Machine. I like the way that one turned out. But again, if you ask me this in a few weeks, I might say something different. It just depends, because it's funny, because I think all writers and musicians are like this. Sometimes you listen back to stuff and you think, "Oh, that's great," and then a few weeks later listen to it and go, "Oh, I can't even believe that. That's really bad." The way you just never know. I tend to be a little critical sometimes of past stuff, but yeah, I just guess it depends when you ask me.
Let's come back home to pattern-seeking animals, let's say.
Good.
What's the key difference between this and Spock's beard?
Well, the major difference is that when I was working with Spock's, and it's the same working with any band, you have to write for the type of music and the styles they tend to do. And the players, all musicians have very distinct sounds they like to go for, methods of playing. I always say, if I'm sitting here writing a song for myself and it has a really cool jazz guitar, clean sound, but you're writing for a player who only plays Les Pauls through a Marshall stack, heavy distorted, you know it's not going to fly, it's not going to work, and you have to tailor yourself. So the initial, I think the initial thing is obviously all the guitars and the keyboard sounds are different. It's a different approach. And from a writing standpoint, with pattern-seeking animals, there's no prearranged conditions. I don't have to sit there in my head and think, okay, I want to go toward a more of a Latin feel here or more of a surf sound here, but oh, they're never going to do this, or there's already a sound. None of that is in your head when you're writing for your own band. So you just go with the coolest musical idea at the time and just go for it. I mean, obviously you have to work in the constraints of the players, but the guys, Ted, Dave, and Jimmy are all such great players. So anything you throw at them, it's just like, great, no problem. And they always just go above and beyond what you even expected. So it's always good. So I think musically, obviously you're going to hear some similarities between the two, but I think in this album, Prehensile Tales, there's a pretty much wider division between the two.
And the sound is a little bit different from the first one also. I mean, there's lots more instruments and it's more of an organic feel. So
right, that was intentional. The first album, when we started recording it, I started recording it as song demos, and then we started talking about it. It'd be cool to just put this forward as a group and see if anyone's out and putting the music together. And then eventually, the record label is interested, so we put all the songs together to make it, seem like it's the same album, even though some of the songs are from different sources and different times and all that kind of stuff. This album, it was from zero. There's no holdover material from the first one. It was all written specifically to have an overall album sound and to be new material and to be its own sound. And the first thing I wanted to do was try the different instruments. I'm still using obviously mellotron and flute, flute, mellotron, all that kind of stuff, and the keyboards with the newer sounds. But I started thinking, well, for this one, why don't we actually get a real flute player on here in a lot of places, and real violin and sax and trumpet and all that kind of stuff. And I think a lot of times when you're writing prog, or a lot of people, they think, oh, we can't put a trumpet in there. That's not very prog, or that's not, or a sax, that's not very prog, which is, I always found weird. But this time it was, well, whatever instrument I think would sound good in the song, let's just go for it and let's do it. And let's get someone to play the instrument. So that was real fun. That was a lot of fun, having the real players in there for a little bit of a different influence in the material.
This begs the question, since it was initially, well, at least recently announced that you are going to go live at Rosfest, but we are where we are now.
Yeah.
Of course, sooner or later you will be playing this live, but with this wider sonic landscape, you mentioned somewhere that you have to bring in other musicians to support the four of you on stage.
Yeah.
Are there some names that you thought of to invite to join you?
Yeah, we have a couple guys who are local here that we had started giving the parts to. We never got to the point of rehearsing. It was just coming up with the parts for everyone, because if you listen to the music, there are sections where there's 3 or 4 different keyboard sounds happening, or a couple guitar parts and a lot of vocals. So there's a local guy named Dennis Atlas, who we had started to work with, and we will work with again. He's a great keyboardist, multi-instrumentalist, real young guy. Another guy named Walter Eno, who's again 2 just multi-instrumental players. So if we need someone to play guitar, both of them can do that. Keyboards, they can do it. And so that was the plan. Now again, who knows when everyone's going to get? Let me just back up. And the reason for that is none of us really wanted to go in with a stripped down version of the songs, and we don't want to play the tracks, backing tracks. So it's like, well, let's just figure out the right amount of musicians to actually pull this across live. But again, who knows when the whole live situation amps up again after the pandemic? We don't know when or where or what festivals and what's going to be held. Let's say it's in a year from now. well, maybe we will want to do something different live, and maybe there'll be a third album, so maybe there'll be different players. It's all up in the air right now, so it's impossible to say what form it'll take then. And we'll just we'll just write it out and see what happens.
So you're thinking to have some musicians on the stage that can actually improvise more or less along with the songs?
Yeah. So to play parts and to be able to improvise. The trick is with some of the instruments that are on there that, for example, trumpet. There's no way that we would be bringing a trumpet player along with this, and no one plays trumpet. So we'd have to figure out a way, maybe if there's a trumpet solo, we'll figure something out. So it can be tricky, but unfortunately it's, you don't have the unlimited funds. You can say, we'll just bring a trumpet player and a flute and sax with us. It just doesn't work like that, because the money is always so tight. In any time you play live, you just can't do it. It'd be fun. I'd have a blast having 10 people up on stage. That'd be a lot of fun, but that's not going to happen. But again, we're not even thinking about that right now because without something specific to shoot for, it's just. Because we just don't know, and no one knows at this point what's going to happen.
What do you think the future will hold for bands like Pattern Seeking Animals? How do you see revenue streams evolving for a band of your stature right now in this pandemic situation and everything?
Well, I think one thing which helps is the fact that we have a second album, Prehensile Tales, coming out really quickly from the first one. So we've built up a body of work that will help. And if we come out another one within a year, there's a consistency there which helps. I think a lot of times I don't want to say we got lucky this all happened, but the fact we have new music coming out right now, it'll allow us to obviously sell whoever's going to buy the album. Because again, who knows what the sales are going to be like. But we'll be able to do some merchandise and keep the promotion going. I think some bands might have a problem are the ones that maybe don't put out a new album maybe over 3-4 years or whatever. Because all of a sudden you're caught without new material and nothing to really promote, and you can't really. It's going to be tough to say, well, please go back and buy the T-shirts from 6 years ago or whatever. It's tough. So I think what's going to happen is that a lot of groups hopefully will just start writing new material and putting them out to get more people, to get just first the name out there. A lot of times, because there's so many prog acts out there right now, I listen to some of these prog radio stations all the time, and I can go for days hearing bands I've never heard of before, and I think, wow, they have a lot of records out, and I've never heard of them. And there's just hundreds of these bands. And if you're not in a band that's putting out new material all the time and keeping up at least your internet presence, it's very easy to be forgotten about. It's because all of a sudden, the new Pendragon comes out and it's fantastic. And you're thinking, all of a sudden you've forgotten about the last band you're listening to because you're so much into that new album. So if you're not out there putting out new material, it's just tough to keep the name out there.
You mentioned having an ear for new releases and so on. We keep asking this, of course. What are some of your current favorites?
Current favorites? Well, I just mentioned Pendragon, which is I love that new album. I think it's really great. It's funny because sometimes I will. The last IQ album I thought was really good too. The one that came out, I think, the end of last year. I really like that one. And a lot of times, because I go through periods where I'm not paying as much attention to new acts out there, all of a sudden I hear a band, it just blows me away, and I may have heard them 5 years ago, but it didn't make an impression, or for some it didn't hit me the right way. Then I hear them again and I'm thinking they're fantastic. The ones I've come to recently, which everyone's heard forever, is Wobbler. I heard something from them 4 or 5 years ago and it did nothing for me. And then a few months ago, I'm listening to one of the, I think Progzilla, that radio station, and they played one of the tracks. I thought this is the greatest thing I've ever heard. And all of a sudden I realized, well, Wobbler, they've been around forever and they have all these albums out, and I've never heard of them. Or I just didn't pay attention. And so I really like them. Pete Jones and Tiger Moth Tales, that's another one. I'm just his stuff I'm always amazed by. That guy is just so good. So the prog stuff, it kind of depends whatever comes out at the time. Those are the new ones on that end. I've a lot of the groups I like, some of the fusion stuff like Snarky Puppy and that kind of stuff. But again, a lot of times you just come across this old material you've never heard before, or just didn't strike you right the first time, and it blows you away.
Do you think it's a golden era of the new prog? Because you mentioned that you lived with the great bands of prog in the 70s, and personal, I'm thinking that right now in this moment, last year and a year before, there's a lot of movement on the prog scene. So you can see a lot of new names out there, and you can see a lot of new albums, striking albums, not just an ordinary album. So
sure.
Do you think it's a new golden era of prog, or it's just a passing movement that will gonna dilute?
I think it's hard to see that type of thing when you're in the middle of it. A lot of times you look back and you think, oh yeah, that was a good era. I think there was a period in the 80s and 90s where things were kind of slow because a lot of people were trying to just recreate the past. They're coming out with, oh, this sounds like Yes, or this sounds like Gentle Giant. A lot of people weren't doing a lot of new stuff. I think in the past several years, a lot of bands are doing more original sounding material that doesn't necessarily sound like an older group. And for example, I don't mind when a group has influences by classic groups. That's great. Like Big Train, for example, who I love. Just love that band. Obviously, they have that Genesis influence, but nothing you listen to sounds like Genesis. Or sounds like a Genesis song. Same thing with Pete Jones and Tiger Moth Tales. You listen to them and you think, oh yeah, that's an obvious Genesis influence. The type of stuff I don't like is where you hear a band and they not only have the influence, but you're thinking, oh, this song just sounds like they took Squonk and just moved around some chords. That's the kind of stuff that drives me crazy. But when you have that DNA of a group in you, and you come up with new stuff, like Big Train does, I think, really well. That's really impressive to me. So in one hand, I think there is a bit of a golden age and an explosion in a lot of original stuff in the past several years. I would still like to hear more prog acts listening and influenced by music outside of the typical prog lanes. I think what happens sometimes is when prog started out, and I'm not the guy who sits there and says, oh, the only good music was back in the 70s. I don't think that at all. I think we forget a lot of the horrible music that was back in the 70s too, prog and of any kind. But when prog started, all those artists, I think people make the mistake of thinking, oh, they didn't like pop music, so they're doing their own thing. I think to the contrary, they all loved pop music and they expanded it from different influences. And I think what happens is that a lot of times now, a lot of prog artists and players only listen to that type of music. So when they write naturally, it gets a little inbred sounding. It just starts to sound kind of closed in, like it's all the same kind of stuff. Where I think if people, listen to other styles of music or, whatever, to get different influences in your writing or in your head to draw from when writing, I think that would be helpful, with anyone.
What other forms of expression, what other art forms are sources of inspiration and ideas, and that you always find that they somehow give you that spark, that creativity spark?
I don't know as far as music. I think in lyric writing that happens all the time. I'm not unusual. I think most writers do this. They keep a journal, or they keep a little your iPhone next, and if you hear a phrase you like, you put it down. You think, oh, I might try and write a lyric around this. So you read a story or a book or an article, something like that. You don't steal something from it, but you think, well, I like the way they put that sentence together, or the rhyming scheme or the poetry, and you write down a note. So I find influences a lot in writing music, in words, music, not so much the visual arts, not from movies or TV, which I just don't watch much of at all. It's mostly listening to music. And I don't even know if it's inspiration as much as it is, I think people just have a dictionary of different things in your head to draw influences or draw different things from. It's like a vocabulary of words. If you're writing a song and you're having trouble coming up with, a part or transition, if you have in your head, oh, there's that reggae song I heard, I kind of like what they did, maybe try something like that, or that chord progression. It's always just increasing your vocabulary. So those are usually the influences, other music. But I don't even want to call them influences so much. It's just more of a vocabulary musically to draw from. I have a couple times, to go back on that, I have seen paintings a couple of times where I thought, I wrote a song for a Spock. So it was like a bonus track called "Moth of Many Flames." It was a bonus track on the Feel Euphoria album, which is Al sang and played guitar on. And I wrote the lyrics from seeing a painting. It was stream of consciousness, so that does happen sometimes. But again, most of the influences and most of the that stuff, I think, comes mostly from music.
You mentioned a couple of times vocabulary and words. And I like that because I wanted to ask you about the band name, which is also the name of the first album released, and the Hansel Tales. There is a certain aesthetic flavor and there is a meaning, and I see some connections between these. Can you please elaborate a bit about how did you came up with these very interesting and puzzling names?
Sure. Yeah. Pattern-seeking animals, again, was a phrase I had seen in scientific articles and things like that for years. And I always liked the way it sounded, and I wrote it down at one point. And in fact, I used that phrase in a Spock song on the last album called Bulletproof. And I always liked the way it sounded. The meaning is that in science, that we're pattern-seeking animals, that we look for patterns in nature and around us in order to learn and survive and evolve. I think the analogy is, if you're in caveman days and you're walking out to the beach and you start to realize the pattern, well, every day this time, right when the sun goes down, the tide is at a certain level and the fish come out to fish, and you see that as a pattern, and you develop you being able to look at those patterns and to grow and to thrive and to evolve scientifically. And this time of year, the birds come back and they're in this tree, so we can hunt them there, for our families or whatever. And I think it's evolutionary, that process. And it also then, we look for patterns in things that aren't there automatically, that don't do us any good. It's like looking up at the stars and you say, oh, that looks like a picture of a bear or a swan. Well, it's not real. We see that even though it doesn't really exist. So, pictures of, oh, look, I see a face in the clouds or whatever. I just thought it was an interesting idea. And of course, the main thing about that name is that no one else is using it for a band name, which is always that's always a killer when you're forming a band. You come up with what you think is a really cool name, and you go Google it, and all of a sudden, oh yeah, there's 4 other bands called that. Ah, damn. That happens all the time. So jumped on that one. Prehensile Tales, it's the play on words, TALES, as stories instead of tails. The animals have prehensile tails. I just liked the way it sounded, and I thought it was funny. And the definition, when you hear prehensile, you're thinking, the ability to grasp. You see the animals hanging from trees, by their tails or whatever. But the second definition of the word is having a keen mental grasp on things. And I thought, oh yeah, that even kind of makes sense. But again, prehensile tails, I was looking for something which fit in with the animal theme, and it kind of satisfied my penchant for just bad plays on words and things like that. I'm just always puns. I'm just always amused by that stuff. So I said perfect. So yeah, it worked out that way. And I was kind of afraid at first. Oh, are people going to get this? Especially, no matter if you speak English, you go from country to country, and people have different cultural things where it means something to one country and it doesn't to another, even though they're both speaking English, because it's different cultural things. But most people have gotten the pun. So yeah, now I'd have to come up with a title for the next album. So who knows? Who knows what will come up with? Who knows? Yeah. Well, yeah. Here's the perfect example. Spock's put out a live album about 10 years ago called "Gluttons for Punishment." Now, in America, everyone knows what that means. It means that you keep doing these things even though everything's against you and you're getting all this crap piled down. It's just a phrase in America everyone gets. When we gave the name of the album to the record company in Germany, even though they speak perfect English, they had no idea what it meant because it's not a cultural phrase there. And we actually had to put a dictionary definition in the album to, what it meant. And I'm sure there's plenty of things vice versa that they would say, which makes perfect sense. But we'd be thinking, what? Even though we're both speaking perfect English, it's a cultural thing. So yeah, it's tricky sometimes. It's tricky.
So you mentioned a little bit about expanding the pop music vocabulary back in the 70s, and here's a slightly left field one, since you dabble in a lot of different genres aside from prog and aside from pattern-seeking animals. Where do you see commercial music evolving or going?
Commercial music, I know commercial music will go where there's hooks and excites people and are singable songs. It's always been like that. Whether anyone likes it or not, that's where it's about. It's short songs which get into your head immediately, and that's the nature of pop music. You hear something on the radio, and it has to strike you right away, or you're just never going to want to listen to it again. A catchy melody or a hook or something you like or a groove or whatever. In pop, you don't have the luxury of buying an album like Prog and sitting there and listening to it for weeks on end before you decide if you like it or not. Commercial music will go with commercial music, for example, right now, if you listen to it, a lot of the vocalists have a very distinctive sound to their voice. They're great singers, but they have a way they phrase things, different way they do different consonants and vowels in their voice, different rhythms, melodic things, which sound foreign to a lot of people who are older because it doesn't sound like the music they listen to. Just the sound of the voices, for example, whether it's a great melody or not. And within 2 years, the people who are out there now, the new kids coming up will listen to these people and say, oh, it sounds old to me because we don't sound like that. So it's always evolving. And in pop music, there's always going to be great singers. I know it's really easy to say, oh yeah, everyone's auto-tuned and everyone sounds like crap and no one is as good as what we used to be and all that stuff. But there's always great talent out there to listen to. And I completely understand if music doesn't appeal to you with the way they're doing it and the instrumentation or however they're doing it. But the kids and the younger people who are listening to pop music and rock or whatever is out there, EDM, K-pop, whatever, are as much into and affected by that music as we were when we were younger. It's equally as meaningful and deep to them as what we loved was to us. And if you accept that, I think you can, again, get a lot of influences. I was just talking to someone else. There's one of the songs on the new album, Why Don't We Run? There's a guitar trick in there on the acoustic guitar, a production idea I heard on a Selena Gomez single from last year that was on the radio. I remember hearing it and thinking, oh, that's a really cool way they use a filter sweep on that guitar. I'm going to try that on the album. Because the one thing which pop music has, which unfortunately I don't think a lot of prog has, is that they keep up on all the current technology. They keep up on all the current synth sounds and production ideas. Now, granted, it may be a flash in the pan and not be popular in a couple of years. But the cutting edge sounds these days, it's all in pop and EDM and K-pop and J-pop and all this kind of stuff where they have to come up with something new and exciting sonically to attract an audience immediately. When I was a kid, you used to listen to, the new Genesis is album out. I wonder what new cool keyboards he's going to be using. Somewhere in Prague that all ended and people just stopped. Not everybody. Some people do still use, current technology, but everyone relies on the old stuff, which still sounds great. I could do an entire album of just Mellotron and B3 and Minimoog, no problem. But I think with pop, to make a long story even longer, one of the cool things is all the new technology. If you just listen to it from that standpoint, as a writer, it's can be really enlightening.
Are you the kind of man who's listening an album from top to the end, or just zapping through the streaming platform and see what else is out there?
It depends on what it is. If I listen to when I get a new album, if I hear something like the Pendragon, the new Pendragon album, which is a perfect example. I heard one of the songs, I think I found it on Spotify or Apple. I don't even remember where I heard part of the song. I thought, oh, that sounds really good. I'm gonna buy the new album. So I bought the album, and when I go and buy an album, I always give it a real good listen, straight, from top to the bottom. And if it sticks, I will listen to that album, start to finish. That's how I want to listen to the album, because it flows really nicely and the songs are good together. If it doesn't really stick, where it goes is in my iTunes into the shuffle with 1,000 other songs. And, then the songs will pop up every once in a while in random order when I'm just listening around the house or whatever. It completely depends on the material. Like I said, a Big Train album comes out, and that's always going to be an album I listen to as an album, start to finish. Something else might come out, and I'm thinking, I like this song, but that one I don't like, and so that goes into the, the random shuffle. And I still might like it, but again, it depends on the album.
To follow up on that idea, what's your take on concept albums?
If it can be done, if there's enough to warrant a concept album, I'm all for it. I think from my own standpoint, a lot of times, if I have a concept in mind and I start thinking about that, I've done this a few times where I start writing the first song and I realize, I've kind of said all I have to say for this, the concept within the first song. So why make it? There's no reason to make it a concept album because I've kind of said everything here. I guess it just depends on what the concept is. And again, concept, I guess we're talking about lyrically, because otherwise I'm not sure. I guess you can do a instrumental concept album, but I'm not sure how you do maybe a concept album of all, banjo and I don't know. I don't even know.
It would be prog though.
It would have to be prog, yeah, Bela Fleck, that type of right. But no, if it stands out, I think what happens in some concept albums I've heard, it starts to wear thin after a while. And you think, well, they probably could have done this instead of a 2-album set, this could have been 1 album, or this could have been, instead of 60 minutes, this could have been a side, this could have been 30 minutes or whatever. I just think it starts to wear thin, and they start repeating themes a lot of times that don't really warrant being repeated, to my, from my listening ears anyway.
You have a couple of long songs on the new one though. So
yeah.
There's still the long song form that somewhat encapsulates most of what concept albums do in 70 or 100 minutes. Repeating motifs and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just didn't start either of the long ones out to be long. The song Lifeboat, I originally wrote it, it was 5 minutes. It was a 5-minute long song. And I got to the end of that first section, and I thought, okay, I like this song. And I started thinking, well, maybe it'd be interesting. So, obviously about a guy on a lifeboat and the ship is going down. And I thought, well, maybe it'd be interesting to write a little part here where it kind of looks back on his life a little bit. And I started writing, and before I know it, you're pushing 18 minutes long in the song. It didn't start out to be like that. it's just, I just get to the point where I think, okay, the song's done, and that's it. I think you get into trouble when you think, I'm going to write a 20-minute song. And if that's really in your head and you've gotten 10 minutes and you're having trouble, I think a lot of times I got to make it 20 minutes because that's what I said I was going to do. And you stretch it out and it's not worth it. And in fact, a lot of times, some of the long stuff I've written, I've gone back before finishing and thinking, this is too long. I need to cut something out of this. Editing is always, important. But yeah, but if it's good, back to the original, if it's a good concept, doesn't matter how long a song is. If it works, it works. If you, I'm always amazed that someone like, Roina from Flower Kings, some of the stuff he writes, you buy an album, you think, God, there's 3 songs on here which are like 18 minutes long or whatever. And how is it going to happen? And it always works out because the guy has such a great mind for that kind of stuff. It always keeps you listening, and it keeps you, it keeps you guessing what's coming next, which I always like. What I like about the Flower Kings with Roina's writing is that, a lot of times you listen to prog stuff and you're listening and you think, okay, I know it's coming next. This is going to be the slow down with the bass pedals and the mellotron and the mini mooks. You can hear what's going to happen next. With Roina, it's always a surprise. And I'm always listening to his writing and thinking, wow, he just did a chord change there, which I never would have thought of in a million years, but it's so cool with that. It's always impressive that he comes up with some of these things. So that's what I like about the Flower Kings. They go through periods, or on an album, I think I'm not crazy about this one, but then they'll come up with something else which just knocks me out. It's so good. I think the new album they come up with was real good. That's a good album. And you go, they've been around forever, and they just come up with so much great stuff. It's pretty impressive.
So you mentioned Drassfest being canceled, and obviously in Europe we had Night of the Prague being also canceled.
Yeah.
Ever thinking of? I know right now making plans like these are probably not really realistic, but ever thinking about coming to Europe and some of the big festivals? Have you discussed that?
Absolutely. In fact, when we were, I would say the one thing that was doubly disappointing about Drassfest being canceled is we were playing the same day as Big Train, which I would have loved. That would have been great just to hear. I'd love to see him live. And we had already been kind of discussing with a couple festivals and tour things in Europe. Yeah, it didn't get any far because everything got canceled. But that's going to be the plan, is to get over there, and whether it's at a festival, depending what shape they take when they come back, or a tour of the clubs. But I think what's going to happen, we just have to wait it out and see what form everything is going to take when everyone gets back to it. Unfortunately, I think, some of these clubs might not survive. Some of the festivals might not survive, or be in just a different format. No one knows at this point. It's just, unfortunately, it's just impossible to make any plans or even any inquiries at this point. You call up, you talk to someone right now and you say, well, what do you think about, no one even knows what they're going to do. So, what can you say? I think the other thing, even in the best of times, it's tough for prog bands to play and to do a tour or a festival financially. That's always tough, just to break even. And then the other issue you always have is there's going to be visa questions to different countries, and so there's already so many impediments, and it can work out. So, but we'll just see what happens coming up, because who knows? Your guess is as good as mine.
So have you guys, obviously, aside from promoting the material and just doing these podcasts and single launches and so on, have you guys looked into, I know a bunch of bands are right now doing a lot of lives and trying somehow to use different forms of online just performing or things like that?
Well, one thing we did, we had planned for earlier this month, before everyone got locked down, was to get together and shoot a couple music videos. And we had to, because we can't get together, and 2 of the guys live in Northern California, so they couldn't travel, so we had to postpone it. What we did, though, we decided, let's do a video from each of our apartments or homes. And the video editor said he's going to edit these together. So we've already shot parts, and we set each of our homes up with lights and a green screen. And we're going to see how this video, it's definitely going to be an interesting experience to see how it turns out. But it's going to be a music video. We haven't really talked about doing anything live yet as a band. Maybe Ted will do an acoustic thing, or Jimmy has been doing things on and off, but I think it would be tough for us to do, like we're looking at now, like a Zoom thing, or the 4 squares and all of us playing.
Yeah.
I don't know at this point we're going to do something like that, because I don't know how good it would come across. And I think a lot of times people's tolerance for those type of things wears a little thin when everyone's doing them. I know when the first people started doing it, it was kind of a novelty, and it's like, oh look, there's Brad Paisley doing a country thing from a studio in Tennessee or whatever. Oh, that's cool, he's really good. And then all of a sudden everyone started doing it, and the charm is kind of worn off for me anyway. Every once in a while someone will come out and do something really cool, but I don't know if I want to add to the glut of that type of stuff, because the good ones are really good, and the bad ones, just with the technical issues, are really tough for me to listen to. So I'm not sure. But again, ask me in 2 months. Who knows? Who knows what we're doing. But the first video we all shot at home is from the song Elegant Vampires, which is coming out on May 8th as the single. That'll be the video. So I'm fingers crossed how that's going to turn out. The video editor is working on it as we speak. And then we'll release a video for, Why Don't We Run, sometime probably later in May after the album is released. We don't have a date on that one yet.
Let me chime in with an idea then.
Sure, absolutely.
Because it is obvious that pretty much the whole industry has to reinvent itself somehow.
Yeah.
This discussion reminds me of something which I really liked. Is the Lonely Robot project of John Mitchell from UK.
Right, yeah.
That has visuals for the whole album, the third
I saw
album.
it. Yeah, that's really cool. I like that. The Lonely Robot. That's a cool thing, yeah.
For me, Pattern Seeking Animals is asking for visuals as well.
Yeah.
So maybe you would do visuals for the entire album, and then do a simul watch with Q&As on such things. I don't know.
That's actually an interesting idea. We've kind of touched on that, because right now what everyone is doing, it's very makeshift. Everyone's just in their living room thinking, okay, I got to do something. How can I set something up here? I can tape my iPhone to the lamp post or the lamp shade here, and so it'll hang down and see me. Then I can light it up with my flashlight or whatever. It's all very whatever you have around you use. So there's technical issues, but I think you're right. If it gets to the point where you want to do more things, I think more people will become tech savvy. We're adding more visuals, or combining with animators or video editors who can combine with the music. And if it ends up more people doing things from home or their studios, it will get more sophisticated. The sound will get better, the video will get better, and the lighting will get better,
and
as you move along.
The other somehow.
Exactly. Right, because like I said, everything is just scrambling to make it look good, but people start realizing, when we did the video, when we shot our parts a few weeks ago, I found out on eBay, you can get these light setups with a green screen background, less than $100 for each person. And they're not the greatest quality, but they work great. And I think there's going to be more industries catering to that type of thing, whether you're a musician or an artist or an actor or a comedian or whatever, and you have to record from home or a small studio. I think that industry is going to pop up more, and there will be more collaboration between, like you said, animators or visuals or whatever, and songs. Because there's a couple things on the new album. Lifeboat, I think, on the new album, because it's so long, would lend itself to great visuals. Unfortunately, at the point we're at, it would be real tough for us to do in our own apartments, and without someone on board who is, like I said, an animator or a filmmaker or something. And it could be coordinated, but I think that type of thing will develop. I agree.
Well, I have a last question, and then maybe my colleagues would have.
Sure.
Do you think prog is music for nerds?
In a way, yes, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's.
Look at us.
Look at me. Yeah, fellow nerds here. No, I get it, because I'm a total studio nerd and musical nerd. If I'm sitting here and I notice, wow, listen to that bass tone that guy has. Wow, that amp sound is really cool. That guitar effect is, and people look at me like, who cares? Can I sing the song? Can I dance to it? Who cares? I'm always listening to this stuff. And I think prog attracts people who had that kind of mindset where they're looking for more than just a singable song, which is great. I don't decry that at all, because there's nothing better to me than a great singable, powerful 3-minute song, because that's a whole art within itself. But I think you have a certain type of mind, and a lot of times they're musicians, but not necessarily, who look for other things in the music. They look for, wow, listen to what that keyboard player is playing. Oh, that drum groove is really cool. It's in 7/4. Listen with the kick drums. You tend to notice more things deeper in the music. And I think that type of thing, by definition, makes us a bit of a nerds. It makes us nerds in a certain sense, because they're listening to the things which other people, it's like computer nerds, the same thing. Most people, they just want to turn it on and, and Skype their grandmother, or, type an email to someone, or play on, Instagram or something. If you're a computer nerd, you're thinking, well, what can I do here to, I want to put a different video card in here, and I want to, do all this. You get in all the technical and the nuts and bolts of things. So I think there's a lot of comparisons there. And again, not a bad thing, because I love it.
Yeah. It was interesting to see that behind a man who lived with the 70s, it's a brand new mind, open to the new experiences and everything. And I was thinking that maybe when my kids were going to tell me, hey, Dad, this music is kind of old, maybe to have your relentless feeling to say, okay, bring me something from your discography, because I'm going to listen to it. And I think this kind of nerd attitude, it's the only one who keeps us alive. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm one of the nerd.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and again, I think a lot of that is just about being curious. I think what happens is that, and it's common. You get older and you think, there's music's no good. When I was a kid, it was better. But music makes the biggest impact on you when you're young. And when I was young, when I was 18, the guys in Genesis were in their early 20s. And those are early 20-year-olds making some of the greatest music ever, in my viewpoint. And if you look now, there are, kids who are making fantastic music right now. And like any other time, you have to wade through just a lot of, stuff which isn't that good. But there's always good stuff out there if you keep an open mind and your ears open to it. There's just always good stuff out there, whether it appeals to you on an emotional level or not. But just being able to look at stuff and say, yeah, you can acknowledge the fact that it's really well written, well produced music, whatever style it is, whether it's jazz or pop or whatever. There's always good stuff out there, because it's a creative spirit in people.
And for all us equipment nerds out there, who maybe you can show us a little bit of the equipment that you have lying around the house, or walk us through it.
I can't where I'm sitting right now, but I will tell you what I have. Let's see if I can do this. Hold on. Let's see. You can't see right over here.
Yeah,
right there. That's a Mellotron.
That's a Mellotron.
It's all blurred out. That's one of the newer, the Mellotron minis or whatever. My studio is back there. Yeah, in my office here is my studio, and I don't have that many actual, keyboard instruments. All the sounds in the past 2 albums, except for that Mellotron on the new album, was done in the computer. It's all soft synths. Behind me, which I can't focus a camera on, is a bunch of guitars and mandolins and a mandocello and electric and acoustic, things like that. But I don't necessarily have a lot of instruments. Everything is in the box. It's all in the computer. It'd be great to have all these, cool synths lying around, but I just don't have the room. I don't have the room. I'm in a small apartment, which I work out of my apartment. So, yeah, if I had a great giant room all for stuff, I'd have all sorts of stuff. I'd have a grand piano. I'd have, a B3. I'd have all that kind of stuff, but none of it fits, unfortunately.
It's been very pleasant to talk to you, John.
Yeah, good talking to you guys.
Taking the time to join us.
Sure.
I think we struck the right chords, and we touched upon the best ideas that we wanted to discuss upon. So
Right.
thanks once more, and we look forward to the release of the album.
Yeah, a couple more weeks.
Surprise us with the third one sooner.
I will kind of semi-promise to do that. Yeah, I'm working on it as we speak. So
Awesome.
I would add something more, that even at some point you're gonna tour on Europe. Maybe you're gonna think about Romania to do it.
I'd love.
Because we're trying to make a community here around the prognotes, and we want to make it count.
No, absolutely. I've never been to Romania. I've always wanted to go. I have a couple of friends who are Romanian, and that's I'd love to go. I'd love to play there. But yeah, we'll just keep it in mind. I'd love to go there. That's
Thank you very much for your time and for your opening.
No problem. Anytime.
Acesta a fost John Boegehold, Patron Seeking Animals și unul din principalii compozitori Spock din ultimii ani. Sper că v-a plăcut. Impresii de final. Cosmin?
Așa cum ai observat, una dintre ultimele mele întrebări a fost dacă considerăm muzica pe care o iubim cu toți o muzică pentru, hai să zicem, tocilari, deși nu e ăsta tocmai cuvântul potrivit pentru a traduce nerds. Se pare că suntem în familie, nu? Rezonăm și avem aceleași repere în ce privește felul cum ne raportăm la această muzică minunată, care ne cheamă de fiecare dată înapoi și care de fiecare dată la o nouă ascultare ne dezvăluie lucruri noi și cred că asta e până la urmă cea mai faină chestie. Și John, și prin ce ne-a povestit, atât cât s-a putut, și prin muzica pe care a scris-o, oferă celor ca noi, ca să zic așa, un univers vast de explorat.
Sau o pastilă foarte bună pentru mințile alienate.
Sau.
Că tot vorbim de vremurile astea pe care nimeni nu știe cum să le catalogheze și cu atât mai puțin cam cât o să țină. Până la urmă, muzica este, cred că, un tratament cât se poate de benefic pentru fiecare dintre noi. Dincolo de asta, libertatea de a alege ce ascultăm, cum ascultăm și cât ascultăm ne aparține. Așa că de unde să alegem este, slavă Domnului, că se produc materiale și probabil se vor produce și mai mult în perioada următoare, având în vedere că toată lumea stă acasă. Așa că nu avem decât să ne facem proviziile pentru ascultat.
Iar în ceea ce privește albumul nou de la Patron Seeking Animals, cred că o să fie printre albumele lunii și la noi în redacție. L-am ascultat cu toții, ne place foarte mult. E și motivul principal pentru care l-am invitat pe John astăzi alături de noi și sperăm să vă placă și vouă. Stați în continuare pe recepție, fiți pe fază. Urmează în continuare câteva episoade, sperăm minim la fel de interesante din seria podcasturilor noastre și ne vedem, ne auzim online cât încă suntem în carantină, iar apoi sperăm să ne vedem și față în față cu toții. Pe curând!
Ciao!
Salut!
Ciao!